in India, the border means Pakistan. Image when you say border, now because Sunny Deol's done a blockbuster, that is the image of the border, right? Notions related to the border are very monolithic. Can we go beyond this war narrative, and can we go beyond the partition narrative also? There are very few projects that I have seen which capture the present. What is happening right now, which comes from the past but isn't just about the past, but no one really knows how their life is, which we were interested in, because they've only become political fodder. People's resilience is stronger than the idea of borders. That the world will present problems, borders will present problems, but people will deal with it, and people will live, and people will find happiness.
When we were watching this film, there were a lot of thoughts that were going through our head. Some people called it remind them of their home. Some people over here live close to the Borderlands as well. My first question would be to ask you, when you were making this film, what understanding of India and borders did it change for you, और क्या फर्क आया था मूवी बनाने के पहले और बाद में in terms of just the understanding of how countries work?
With respect to borders, I think especially before conceiving the project, borders seem like very rigid things as a construct. It seems like a very given thing that border hai, it's like a hawa, it's like a big thing, right? The instant feeling it instills in a person, or at least instilled in me, is fear. The word border, or the idea of going to a border, every time I would tell my mother, or any friend that I'm going to do this, I'm going to go to borders, their immediate concern would be ke bach ke rehna, right? That is the image of border, right? And again, the very idea that borders just been there, like we don't grow up questioning borders, because the way our education system works, the way geography works, the way we buy atlases, and in our minds history and geography sort of get enshrined. It's a very particular image. We forget that these borders have come out of historical processes, right? So that used to be there. I think while doing the project, the project introduced a lot of fluidity and humanity into the idea of borders. Like, the intention itself was to look for people and to tell the story of borders through people. So the image definitely got populated with people, but I think more importantly that borders change, borders evolve. One interesting story that we couldn't capture, but we were thrown out of that place. It is in Nepal. It's called Susta. So with Nepal, we have a treaty where the border is actually the river, and Susta is in Nepal. And over time, what happened was the river shifted course, and Susta is now supposed to be India according to the treaty. Now no one's sort of ready to, like, Nepal's obviously not ready to give that place to us, but we've created a Sashastra Seema Bal SSB outpost there now. So those kind of things, that was very fascinating to see Dholi exchange that santra at the border. That's not the image of India Bangladesh border for me. India Bangladesh border for me is smuggling, people getting killed. Santra getting exchanged for parents is not the image, right? So it changed, I think, overall. I don't know, Anadi, what do you think? How did it change your idea of borders?
Yeah, pretty much what you said was what our notion was while I was when we were getting into the film. And I always used to wonder what would it be, like how would people be and how different would their lives be? Would it all be about the border? And then while we were editing the film, we started to understand that these are very day-to-day normal people who just happen to live in a border area, and then you started to see the universality in their life, and how there are obviously they're affected by borders by being part of that whole geography. But I think what dawned upon me eventually was that these are very, very normal people like us, and that was the most starking thing.
Again, I think that the exoticism with the idea of a border gets challenged, right? Because once you are there, it's a real thing. It's not exotic anymore.
The one thing that I noticed throughout the movie was most of the people who told the stories were female. And there was just one of them, like from Imphal, but like majority of them were females. And I just wanted to know if that was like a conscious choice you made or it just happened.
So that's a question we get asked a lot, right? Because in fact, the funny thing is when we received the national award, in the citation, they forgot that there's a guy. So they actually literally wrote that, for beautifully weaving stories of 5 women from India's borders. I think it was not intentional. And we've mostly, whatever analysis we've done, I think one is that the whole project was a reaction to the masculine image of borders, that borders are terrorists and army and men. It was from the beginning a reaction to that. So automatically we were looking for stories which would challenge that notion. Second is all my associate directors were women. Nupur was my main associate director throughout the project. And then on individual stories also, Joyona Medhi was helping us in Bengal, Ankita was helping us in Nepal, and Ritu was helping us in Manipur. So everywhere we were finding access through women. And interestingly, that led us to spaces like the shelter home, for example, where I think without a crew which is mixed, and especially if the coordinating person is not a woman, maybe it will be difficult, especially even the interviewing person. Jonah was building her relationships. I am not sure if a guy could have done that so easily, especially given that we only like had 10-14 days also to shoot. So those are things which we often think about when we rationalize ke aisa kaise hua. And this is something that we figured before our Northeast shoot, which was the last shoot. So on our last shoot, our agenda was to find a man, and we went out and we were just looking for male characters. I love remembering this moment where we were talking about how Borderlands is not the right name for this film, and I was like, Motherlands kar dete hain. And then everyone was like, nahi, dhondo yaar, bande bhi dhondo, let's mix it up.
We actually did have two men till almost the semi-final cut, and we were trying to make one story of a man from Arunachal Pradesh work a lot. Also, I think it did. We definitely had more women, and that is something we both were also leaning towards, because because these stories were really unheard of, and you never get a women's perspective over what they are going through and how they are living in a border area. So I think that was much more interesting and much more layered than the perspective of men, especially because the perspective of the men was more political, was more. It was a lot. It didn't have much to do with a very day-to-day livelihood, but it had something to do with uh, a larger geopolitical narrative. So we also were tending to go towards personal stories. So I think that was also one of the reasons that incidentally most of the characters are women.
So I actually had two questions. The first is for both of you. There were parts in the documentary that editing wise, how if one person is speaking and there is something like there is some other cut of some place else shown. There were times where that was, not the case. For example, when there was a shot of Deepa talking, and then there is another cut in between of the same shot. So, was there a reason why there was not some other shot or not some other variation that was put in those points?
What we were basically trying to do was one, to keep the film as raw and as less intrusive as possible, and that's why we have in a way designed the cuts. So there are some places where you would see jump cuts, and you would notice that there are jump cuts, and then you would. So we at those places we don't want to cut away. We want you to look at them and just be with them, and don't want to go into another place or so you be with them. Yeah, there is a jump, of course. So as a viewer, you would notice there's a jump. We've cut something from there, but we're trying to be less less intrusive as possible. That was a thought. And there are some places, for example, in Noor's story, you would probably see that after a point you cut to the empty spaces, and she's still talking. But at that point, I think we felt that it got a little too overwhelming to hear the story, and we didn't want to harp on the because she was describing some horrid incidents that she was going through, and we didn't want to how to put it. We didn't want to sort of exploit that story that she was saying. So we chose to sort of cut a little away from it. So the thought was roughly that, yeah.
And the second one was just overall as a documentary, because you must have gone and asked so many people about so many stories. What, like, the amount of people you must have documented to the amount of people it actually came down to? The process of it, or the amount, like the number overall of how many people you must have gone to get to these 5 stories?
So I think there are there are two sides of it. One is just the number of people we might have interviewed, right? And second is like the number of people we had to contact to reach the people who we interviewed, and then we interviewed, right? So I think we went to about 18 or 19 places. Like you have 6 places in the film, but we went to 18, 19, and every place we tried to interview 4 or 5 people. And so that would probably take us to some like 120 people. But I have a feeling like there were more interviews, because initially we were just interviewing anyone. So so that many interviews, but also in terms of the process, many times we are going through not for profits. What we start with is, okay, let's read a lot on internet, and if something fascinates us, something's not there in the mainstream, something's fitting our agenda of what we want to do, like not tell typical stories of violence and very literal violence, right? We were looking for some sort of different ideas of violence, violence which is not seen. For example, what is happening with Noor while she is stuck in the shelter home, that's a lot of violence, right? She's anyhow rescued, and then she has to spend 3 more years for no fault of hers. It's just purely because she's a different nationality. So something fascinated us. We would try and find out how can we reach these potential characters, and then we would touch base with possible collaborators. Like in Noor's story, we found an NGO called Shonlap, which is on the outskirts of Calcutta, and they run their own shelter home. And before that, we were actually trying to find shelter homes being run by the government, but the government's very wary of giving permission to documentary filmmakers. They're very afraid. And so we found this NGO, and then they introduced us to the potential characters. Whereas in stories like, for example, Dholi, it was more like we know that this event happens, but it just happens on a very organic level. So we need to find villages where this happens, and then get introduced to the characters. So it was more finding those villages, trying to get in touch with the sarpanches or village heads of those villages, or through some local journalist get an introduction to the village administration, reaching that place on a physical recce, and then convincing them and getting an introduction to the kind of characters we wanted. So that was another process. So Nupur was really helping us out with creating this network. And once we were there, it would become more of a direct process, where now we are in touch with these. We've been introduced to 10 people. Out of those 10 people, 4 or 5 want to come on camera, and then we do the process and figure out who's working best. And it also sort of comes to the edit, where for some stories we have options. For Noor, there is another character who could have made it into the film. For Kavita, we had another character who did an interesting interception. She stopped a couple from eloping. There's a girl and there's a guy, and they have come in and they are saying that, oh, we are just going to India to just stroll. And she was doubtful. And there's this another girl, Maheshwari, basically, and Maheshwari called up the parents, and the parents, the first thing, they're on the run, stop them. And I remember very nicely, because the camera's framed from behind the couple. Like you can see the couple's faces, and you can see Maheshwari right in front. And so Maheshwari, for the good or the bad, because many times men, they trick young women. They say that they are in love, but they would bring them to India, and they would get trafficked. But at the same time, maybe they are actually lovers, and they were trying to escape and break some boundaries of the love kind, but they are unable to. But then on the edit, we realized that, okay, Kavita has a better personal story to share, where she has fought personal odds which have been stacked against her, and she in general has given a better interview, sort of. So we went with Kavita. So that's the process, right? From research to the edit.
So my question was, so I think one segment that was really personal to me was when you introduced your mother. And one section where she said that, there are some messages that go unresponded. It just hit me like a rock there. Like it was so like close to me and like there was something personal. So here I just want to ask, like, what was going through your mind that you wanted to introduce your mother into the frame, and what was your actual emotion, and what did you go through, and after the entire segment was shot, what were you going through?
Initially, I think the only intention was I was talking to my mother during our bare beginnings in the project, and she told that she's never seen a border. And I was shooting with her thinking that maybe she'll talk something about our partition angle. My maternal family came from what is now Pakistan. And I thought it might be an interesting conversation to have with her. But she ended up saying that मैंने देखा ही नहीं है border. And for me, the thought was, okay, through my film, I'll take her to the border for the first time. And because border is a thing you see usually through men's perspective, and that through men who are out there, right? And my mother's a homemaker. So I was like, okay, if a homemaker goes to the border, how would it be? How would she react? And then my mother would get to see a border also. It just seemed like a fun thing. We did it on the first schedule where, in fact, I asked all my crew to go, like only me and my DOP went. And I was like, कि मेरे को और किसी को involve भी नहीं करना है process में. It was during the shoot that, it became a lot about not just going to the border, but also about our relationship. And that's something where, you'll see most times characters, when they take control of the narrative, they bring something of their own to the story. Deepa herself suggested that, I want to role play. I want to show you how it was. Noor herself, we were not aware that, Noor's found love in the shelter home. It's something that she brought up. We were not even looking for, that kind of an angle. So it is again like my mother just made the conversation about us, and I was sort of like, okay, now we are talking about us. And I wasn't questioning it much on the shoot, because on the shoot I'm like, okay, let's flow. I think it affected me more on the edit, because on the edit you are viewing it as a third person. You're like, oh, okay, this is how that moment was. And I was so unsure of what that was, because I kept on telling Anadi, I think even till the pre-final cut or before that, I was like, is it making sense? Should we keep this story? And it really helped that we had Anadi who is very objective, more objective than me for sure with it. But it was very difficult to look at some of the rushes, because you also become aware of the distance that has been there in the relationship, and difficult to understand what to do with this. I didn't really know how to see this, how to place this, and then you have varying reactions, because the first half does not really talk about the border in a very conventional way. Like there's literally no talk about India Pakistan going to the border, nothing, right? So then you get asked questions during feedback, and that's before the film gets logged, right? So a lot of self-doubt sometimes creeps in ki, yaar am I indulging too much? But I think we sort of kept it, and I think it's one of the parts, what I feel good is it's one of the parts that actually makes people feel like. We've had a lot of reactions of people who've decided to be like, who've come in better connection with their parents after watching the film. Like people come and say that, now we talk more often to our mothers, our parents. And my mother was here in Bombay last week, so she attended a screening physically, and it was just amazing. So overall, it's been a great experience, especially after the film started going out, because my mother, then I started seeing it from mother's point of view. Like, how does my mother feel like she's part of my film? And how does that change her perception of herself or her life, or does it bring her happiness? So those things have also become important over time.
First of all, lovely film. I enjoyed watching it. And I loved the laid back, observant approach of the camera. And throughout the edit, I could see in some of the scenes where the mother said life has become monotonous now, and you chose to go with jump cuts because it's become so routine. The repetition is so much that it goes by in a flash now. So I loved some of the editing choices, because in other places you chose to hold the camera for as long as it was possible. I loved the empathetic lens towards your subjects, and there was that hint of sensitivity. And my favorite moment was with you and your mother when she broke down and you guys hugged each other. You were in an embrace, and the DOP just zoomed out of that moment because it was that personal and intimate. I think that was my favorite moment from the film. And my question was, I've like throughout the film, I could sense an undercurrent of loneliness and longing, also punctuated by the lone string instrument in the film. So was that a conscious choice, or was that a theme that emerged over the course of making the film?
I think we were not necessarily looking for loneliness, but longing is an emotion that I feel we often ignore the amount of it's my feeling that the idea that life is inherently painful, or there is an inherent meaninglessness to life, but people are still trying to go on, and sometimes they are very aware of this, that life's not perfect, life's full of problems, and yet we have to go on. And I don't know if we were consciously looking for it, but one thing that strikes me is that, for example, Holly, the way she talks about her past, she always talks about it with a smile, although the past is very painful. And that's just inherent to her personality. I don't know if I was consciously looking for it, but when we saw it, same with Noor, the kind of problems she's been in, and yet she's sort of found love in those circumstances. After being trafficked, after being rescued and being stuck, she's found something about which has made her happy. So we were definitely looking for this element of hope, if you can call it that, which is like, okay, there are a lot of problems, but how are people coping with it, and are people able to find ways to sort of just find ways to go on? So I think along with that comes the idea of loneliness, maybe, because the whole idea that you will find something, it sort of has to come out of a place of being misunderstood, being out of place, being under immense amount of constraints which borders put you in. I think one choice is that we also decided that each story will be one character, so that sort of isolates them also from their, like, we weren't looking for stories of families, and even if we tried to shoot, they didn't work out. So the idea that the film inherently is about individuals may also accentuate that feeling. Anadi, what do you think?
Yeah, but I think what you were saying about longing, I think that also was in a way part of our discussion, because we were also, because borders also create that whole because they divide people in a very unnatural way, that so some strings get they remain attached, and then the longing comes with that. Like most of the stories, you would see that there is a sense of that, where there's a sense of, because all the characters have that sense of what could have been. And I think that is something which also is something that we were trying to connect all of these characters through, because that was an emotion which existed in almost everyone. And in a way, because it was a challenging edit that way to bring all of these people together and have their emotions transcend into each other's stories, because otherwise how would you connect them, and how would you make it into one film? So I think longing definitely was one of the emotions that helped us bridge them.
I also want to ask, what's the total amount of footage that you guys had eventually? मतलब कितना record किया था आप लोग?
Seems like 120 hours or something.
Yeah.
And
I think we never put it on a timeline. It's based on the data we have. We just were like, अच्छा 2 TB में इतना होगा तो कितना होगा. So
but like generally documentaries में इतना footage रहता है या फिर कम? What's the average foot? I don't know, which is why I'm asking. Like for a 60-minute documentary, इतना footage रहता है कि there is lesser sometimes or more than that?
I think
it varies.
It varies, but yeah, this is generally the amount of footage that I would expect from a documentary film.
So you have to sit through 120 hours of film to find a story and like edit it and make a 60-minute thing out of it.
Yeah.
How much time does it take for you to edit the entire thing and then coordinate with Samarth as well for the same?
I think it took us. I think it took me on my own. I think around a month and a half or so to watch everything, and because it happened over a period of time, also because they shot over a period of time, So I did have opportunities where I could just see the footage and make my mind about it. So it then after the shoot, it took me around 1.5 months or so to sort of come up with a very loose edit, and then we started sitting and jamming on it. So then that took us around 2-3 months more.
So, I mean, in between the two of you, who's the more nitpicky one in terms of like, "अरे ये क्यों निकल रहा है यार, ये रखते हैं ना," and just how's the conversation like between you, and who else is involved in the entire process? आप लोग मतलब exactly अगर बोला कि मैं अगर बैठा होगा उस रूम में बैठा हूँ मैं, तो आप लोग की बातें क्या हो रही होगी उस टाइम पे? Like when you're discussing क्या रखना चाहिए, क्या नहीं रखना चाहिए?
I think we both have our own individual favorites, and then we try to retain them, and then the other person tries to convince the other person that why this should be there or should not be there. And I think it's a process of, then we have this give and take, that okay, fine, we should retain this story, but then try to make it lean so that it appeals to you as an audience, and it also appeals to me as an audience, because ultimately at the end of the day, when we are sitting and working, there are two people who are their own audiences. So we are ultimately trying to almost guess what the audience will like by making us into an audience. So the process is that. I think Samarth can add some interesting tidbits to it.
No, I think one is, I think we are very privy about our process. We don't like more people. As till now, I think what process we followed is like the two of us are there, and if anyone wants to sit, we usually ask them to leave. And even I just don't like the third person in the room. Like I want it to be a very private affair, so that we can be dumb and lame, and I can. Yeah. I think I also have like maybe some image issues that I don't want to be dumb in front of a third person, but I can be dumb with an Adi. So I think it's very unfiltered. If there's something that I'm feeling, I'll just say it, and then it's a conversation. Maybe I don't know. I know, especially from my first short film, the kind of conversation we had, that was the most randomest conversation where, it was about fireflies and this village, and, I wanted to make it about a character. And this character was most fascinating to me because he had a monkey skull in his home. And, Anadi sort of convinced me that, this is not, this may be fascinating to you, but this doesn't really tell anything about this person. So we have that kind of conversation. I think it's sort of non-judgmental to an extent. And then I'm like, yeah, probably, monkey skull doesn't make for a great character. There needs to be so much more about a person to sort of feel for them. So that's like the extreme thing, where we're talking about, okay, I may be obsessing over a certain thing, but we'll try and give each other a perspective. And some of the conversations are definitely about, I remember that, we've discussed how some stories are more challenging. That in Unreserved, there's a story of a woman who's on the run from her family. And, the sound quality was not good, for example. And we were discussing it as a concern, but we were also sure that we need to make it work. And even in this film, I think Noor, for example, we were both very sure of the challenges of the story, that, we can't actually see her face. How do we empathize with her? But we are on the same page that we need to make this work. So then sometimes it's about being aware of the challenge and let's together try and make it work. And sometimes it's about Anadi's tried something which I am not sure of, and then we are having a conversation. And sometimes it's about me obsessing over like a weird thing, which sometimes may work. I don't know. It works maybe 1 out of 10 times, but just having that discussion that this is seeming interesting. So I think the variety of conversations.
It was an overwhelming journey of 6 to 7 minutes, especially for someone like me who comes from Bengal. I live in Calcutta, so I know the kind of journey I've been taking to and showing the entire nation for this. So I really like to know what was that one seed point of germination of the idea of having, like Punjab, Northeast, Bengal, and Nepal, and all the areas you covered. I'm sure there must have been many others which did not make to the final cut. But what was that one seed of germination that which resonated and you like, matlab isme film karte hai? like इस पे documentary बनाते हैं?
I think it's mostly the very on a personal level. It is to do with one of the interviews we did during Unreserved, which is something we shot in Kashmir, and a guy just gave us a very different perspective about. He described his family situation where he supports Pakistan, his brothers in the army, he supports India, and he talks about how if his village gets electricity and he gets a job, maybe he'll also start supporting India, right? So it was a very different conversation, and I think in general the idea that the border in India, the border means Pakistan. Image when you say border now, because Sunny Deol's done a blockbuster, that is the image of the border, right? So
Right.
you need to the idea that okay, India, Pakistan, and notions related to the border are very monolithic. So that's why from the beginning itself, for me, what was important was we do, like, diversity is an important part of the project. It cannot just be like, again, all India, Pakistan. It also cannot just be India, Pakistan and India, Bangladesh, because there's still a partition narrative going on. Can we go beyond this war narrative, and can we go beyond the partition narrative also? Because I think partition, and every project related to partition is very important. They've in fact helped us during this project, but at the same time it's exploring an important layer of nostalgia, and I think documenting the past, without which you cannot contextualize present. But there are very few projects that I have seen which capture the present. What is happening right now, which comes from the past, but isn't just about the past, right? You're just not like reflecting on the past. I wanted to see things happen in the present. So those were the important things, and I think the germ really lay in one of those conversations, like I said, and the general like whole irritation with the whole discourse that every Bangladeshi is a terrorist, every Pakistani is an enemy, and then we are not even talking about people in the Northeast. People are really invisibilized because certain things, just like Pakistani Hindus are all they're used as an identity, right? But no one really knows how their life is, which we were interested in, because they've only become political fodder. So we wanted to break those notions.
The favorite moment of for me, that like you will put fence wires, but how will you divide the heart? Like there is one particular line where the brilliantly done. I was so touched, while seeing through. I'm sure everyone present here is, or whoever has watched the film is.
I actually had two questions. First one was, what are the kind of base questions that you ask for an interview that you actually know you'll get answers to, like it'll nail the kind of direction that you guys are taking it. So just wanted to understand that process.
So we don't have a very fixed questionnaire, but we know that we want to talk to people about their lives and not beyond it. We are not asking people for their opinions. Dolly lives right at the border, and she was interviewed in April 2019, which is just like at the time of general elections, where the whole political discourse in Bengal is about CA and NRC. But we did not ask her about CA and NRC because she's not an expert, and we were trying to just get into a personal zone. So that's a very important decision to make. What do you talk to people about? And then it's more about, what are we trying to do? Like, we have some idea of a story. Like with Dolly, we knew that it is about her separation from her family. So it started from her childhood, that, how was it to live there? And how did you come here? What were your feelings when you were coming here? What were your feelings when the fence got built up? How was it to be separated? What did you miss out on? And how is it now to see them every year? When did Milan Mela begin? So we had a broad structure. It's very linear. Like, let's just try and follow her life and get her life story. And rarely I never let myself or anyone who's doing interviews on our behalf have like a paper of questions. That's not the process we follow. So it's mostly personal, based on the story that we are exploring. The crux of the story is that can we get her to talk about this separation, because that is at the core of the story. But again, there is no one way of कि ऐसे करेंगे तो हो जाएगा. It's something like, okay, I sit with you, I know that this is your story, and I just try and listen to you. So it's very informal, it's free flowing, and again, that's also why we try multiple characters, because it doesn't work all the time. and these are not experts. So we end up interviewing 5-6 people, and out of those 5-6 people, maybe 1 or 2 interviews are actually working. And it also allows the interviewer to not be under massive pressure that, we need to make it work right now. They also can enjoy. And I actively, try and just make it fun. Like, ask, sometimes it's just absurd questions, which Anadi also has to listen to then on the edit.
Be a part of the shoot, or does it help to have the editor as part of the shoot when you're making a film, like a documentary, or is it always better to keep it separate, like when you get an objective perspective from the editor when he's not part of the process of making the film?
I think at least with our process, Anadi usually does not. He's never come on the shoot, and I think that has helped, I feel, because he always says that, you keep on telling me these stories, they are not in the footage, right? I remember we told so many stories to him that, ye bhi hua wahan pe, ye bhi hua, and then he's like, "Fayda kya hai? Footage mein to hai nahi." Because I think if he also becomes part of the crew, then it's his stories also, and his way of looking at the footage may change. And so I think it helps. It also gives us perspective that, what worked, what did not work. And because our process was that, okay, let's shoot, let's come back and watch the footage. So doing that review of the footage allowed us to understand what is working, what is not working. And I think that objectivity is important.
It's better because then, I don't see what's behind the camera. So I don't have that memory of how much pain they went through to shoot a particular thing. But if the thing is not working out, then that's the only criteria I have in my mind of not keeping it, or vice versa, basically. So that helps me also to bring my perspective, which is then, not crowded or shrouded by all the other things which were happening behind the camera. So I think that protects me and my objectivity like that.
There have been multiple instances of what was the most touching moment. For me, there is a moment where they're doing the girl in the shelter home. She's making an art, the quilling art, and she feels sparkle inside the, the quilling. And so kudos to you to, sort of capture a very symbolic moment where you're trying to look at the light at the end of the tunnel, and she is smiling. So there was that sort of fighter instinct while she was narrative of her story. And kudos to you to capture that narrative in a very soft manner. The other thing that I wanted to sort of, while I was watching the documentary, was there is this story by Manto, Tobrate Singh, which is the No Man's Land. And the overall thematic area that, border, and I think you touched upon it, but my question is that the overall theme in a border, in a story that is around war or around, dividing, somewhere the intent of it is war and division of land, comes from the, symbolic aspects of aggression and, some amount of lunacy in a lot of ways that, people who are hungry for power, the hegemony over there is power. So while you were deciding onto the thematic areas, and I'm sure that the research would have had, references to multiple stories and multiple writers, what I saw at the backdrop was the theme of empathy and somewhere, hope. So was there a thought behind capturing that emotion and not going a little more extreme towards, because I could see that there is pathos in the storyline, but there is still hope in the storyline. Whereas we see a lot of stories and a lot of documentaries where it is progression and, that instinct of having that division of power dynamics playing into the storyline. So was there a deliberate attempt to capture empathy and, hope and some amount of happiness that I could see in different parts, whether it was the color of love or the color of, independence and freedom and fearlessness, but with a softer, touch to the entire line?
There was definitely from the beginning this idea that this is a film about people and people's inner lives. And in the moment, it is not no longer just about their problems, it is about their being. It's, I think, going beyond the idea of sympathy. And we did not want to reduce people to their problems. We wanted to explore them in a broader way and focus on feelings. And in the moment you are again talking about feelings, I think the idea of empathy comes in. And I think hopes something that we also, I think, nurtured on the edit, because what we realized was every character that we were trying to work with, and the seventh character that Anadi is talking about, I think why that character probably didn't work out was because it was not like he was talking about a problem, but maybe nothing was happening around it, and he was looking like a misfit in the final mix of characters. uh, I think one of the things that I had written in the first note on the project was that people are big. At least this is the image I want to project. I don't know how true it is, but people's resilience is stronger than the idea of borders. That, the world will present problems, borders will present problems, but people will deal with it, and people will live, and people will find happiness. That was something that was very inherent. At least we shot a lot of stories, but that was something that I kept close to my heart. That, people need to come out stronger than borders. They will find ways. And I think while shooting the moment Dholi, we shot Dholi, I was like, this is happening. The moment they started exchanging, because we did not know. Even on the day of shoot, we did not know how does this event happen. But the moment they started exchanging gifts, I was like, this is what people are capable of. This is very minute, probably, maybe doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. And the fence is still there. India, Bangladesh are still sort of separated, but people have found some way to be in touch in a very literal way. So that was something there. And I think maybe if from the edit, what were your impressions? Probably, I don't know, with the idea of hope.
I think what Samarth was saying was what we discovered while listening to a lot of people, that with the amount of bad stuff that happens to them, there is still a smile on the face. There is still a hope that things will become better. And I think that that really also guided us through the edit in a way. And that's, I think, also one of the reasons that there are narratives of women, because I think women somehow have this spirit, which it somehow have this hopeful thing that things will be eventually better, which which I think the other men that we interviewed, they were a little less hopeful about this. Also, I think because we are talking about this, it's also a process that Samarth has been inculcating, because if it sees earlier films, especially Undeserved, it has a so there's a lot of very heavy subjects that people talk about. They talk about religion, they talk about um, different very controversial subjects, but then they talk about it in a very um, lighter conversational manner. So as an audience, you would just want to hear them out even if you don't agree with them. So I think that is something which we anyway need more in this current scenario, that we're able to talk about varied opposing views and laugh about it also.
She says that I used to apply a lipstick, and I would tell people that if you don't let me wear a jeans, I'll commit suicide. I mean, uh, while you see that from a perspective of different lenses, but the end result of it, 2 points stayed with me. Was one when she said that I will wear a jeans no matter what, and the other one was definitely the glitter in the quilling art. I mean, that really captured the entire essence of the documentary.
Thank you. And with the two characters that you've talked about, I want to also update, because it's been 3 years since we shot with them. So Deepa has actually become a nurse, and she often wears jeans to her work. And Noor's been repatriated, so she's back in Bangladesh. She's out of the shelter.
Any last thoughts on just what as filmmakers, what would you guys like to tell us as viewers of cinema on how we can appreciate films better? Like anything you want to tell us? Any last thoughts on filmmaking and just how we should view films better?
At least I am not a guru at all this, but I think what my experience of 7 years in filmmaking is that, as an audience, as a country, we are slightly obsessed with the celebrity culture. And I think there's a lot of power in common people's stories. And I personally feel like they do not have so much space. And even in terms of approaching these narratives, it's difficult to access these kind of stories. So as an audience, if you can find more and more of such content where, it's not about a star, and even if it's non-fiction, it's not just about some celebrity, or I think that the more rooted the story is in common people's experiences, and what I'm trying to imply is, people's history of times, and oral histories, those kind of uh, I think narratives are interesting to watch. I think they can make us feel in different ways, take us into a world which is not ours. So I don't know, try and find more of those kind of narratives. Attend film festivals. I think that's the more precise advice I feel. Like, attend film festivals, I guess, if you're already not attending.